All right, everybody, welcome. This is the Sandbox Season 4 overall retrospective on this season. I'm doing this currently by myself. Burst has said that they were going to do a separate video from me, and that is A-okay. We're going to have 3 parts to this retrospective. Firstly, I want to do a little bit of a PR follow-up, so I will be talking about just things I noticed for individual coaches, some things that happened post-PRs, that sort of thing. I'll be doing a season and team analysis for myself. And then part 3 is just kind of discussing elements of future Sandbox seasons and just some other retrospective on things from this season. Okay, so we're going to start with the PR follow-up. I imagine this is probably what most of y'all want to listen to. So we'll kind of get into it. So we are going, firstly, we're going in terms of standing order, and then for playoffs, it was going to go in playoff order, which ended up looking the exact same as standing order by the end of the season. So spoiler alert for that. So we're mostly just going in reverse standing order. So starting with that, we start with Radial, whose season was 0-7 with the kill leader of Drifloon. Team did have a transaction post PRs with the Gimme Goal. In general, my set into Radial was actually really close. It looked like Radial had a couple really good sets and games throughout the season. I think really it was a team issue more than anything. I think the Gimme Goal did bandage the problem, but the pieces on the team, they just didn't gel well enough together by the end of it. And it was kind of unfortunate it's an 0-7 season. I feel like that's a little bit misrepresentative of how I felt playing Radial, because that was one of my closest sets of the season, like I said, and how I saw some of the other sets go down. I think this team could have easily picked up another couple wins with some better RNG and maybe some different prep and some points. So it's a little unfortunate. I do think, though, that Radial has a good shot to turn it around in future seasons. So I'm excited to see what happens in the future. Next in reverse standing orders was Raz, our admin for the Sandbox Draft League, the creator of it. Final standing was 1-6 with a tie of kill leader between Slosif and Mastiff. I chose Mastiff as the mascot for reasons we'll get into. My big observation is I watched a lot of the games that Raz posted and saw other people play Raz, and I think the team just never got a good flow going. The Meowth ended up being pretty anti-synergistic with the Trick Room mode, and I think the Solosis underperformed big time. Solosis hits really hard, but it has the problem of it needs to set Trick Room and then also have enough turns to take advantage of its sky-high special attack stat, and I feel like it just never really got the marriage of those two things with how bulky it was. It just didn't really have the ability to make the most of that, and the Meowth clicking Trick Room for it wasn't super ideal either, because yes, in theory it's okay, you Trick Room, you fake out Trick Room, and then the Meowth kind of goes, and then you kind of go in, but it just ended up not working the best a lot of the time. I liked the Makuhita Solosis lead was definitely the better lead of the two. Defensive synergy on the team was also I think a huge problem the whole season. The team just didn't have enough of a defensive backbone in a season where I think defensive synergy was actually one of the biggest things that determined how well a season went for people. I do think, generally speaking, though, Raz played the team very well and had a really strong set into me. And I think the prep was pretty good too. I think just in the future, if you can find a comp that feels more Raz or your style that you want for Little Cup, I think that's going to do you a lot of wonders. I do think there are a lot of elements on the team that are good on paper, and I actually picked the Mastiff for the mascot too, because I thought the Mastiff had really good prep all season. I saw some really cool Mastiff stuff. I think that's a mon that I now kind of have my eye on for future seasons after watching it this season, so take that as a win. Moving on, we have Ted, who was 1-6, kill leader of Kerbrawler. And yeah, so for Ted's team, biggest note, honestly, I think a lot of the 1-6 is because Ted's team does not have Trick Room, and not having Trick Room was crazy punished this season, which we'll talk about later. But I think that lack of Trick Room was a surprisingly big deal. Pretty much everything said in the previous PR still applies to this one, especially on the more critical side of the team. Those exploits really did show over the course of the rest of the season. Noibat continues to be bad. I did watch a couple of Ted's sets. I thought the Flamingo set was actually a really good showing for the team in Ted, so I did want to shout that game out. I thought it was really solid. I also am going to say something bold and brave here, because I've run Sun before, and I actually think that this team with Trick Room and an Oddish instead of a Bulbasaur would have been a really good contender this season. I think the Crabrawler, Oddish, Trick Room core with a Vulpix in the back would have gone like absolutely crazy with the Sandile support and everything. You replace that Meowth with a Trick Room setter, you get an Oddish for your Chlorophyll and also Trick Room Sweeper, and I think this team kind of like shoots off in a big way. That's not the team we had, but it's just something that I personally am going to take notes of for future seasons, because I do really like running Sun in Little Cup. Also kind of a surprising standing for really the only weather abuse team, which we'll talk about the other team of the weather setter later, but it didn't really have like a weather abuser so much. Next is Luke F, who was also 1-6, kill leader Nummel, and it was not close. Team, there were some transactions made after the PRs, picking up a couple mons. I remember the Bagon was new, and some other mons kind of got added to the team. First season that we had with Luke last season, was just a really, really strong performance to obviously a not as strong performance this season. I still mostly blame the team, honestly, but I did check. I didn't watch a lot of Luke F's games or anything, but I did check some prep for like weeks, and there was a little bit of weird prep a couple times. I think the transactions helped, but it didn't really fix what was addressed in the PR. Like, it did get better. I think the defensive synergy and offensive synergy on the team actually got a lot better post-transactions, but I don't think that everything that like was recommended really got put into like good use and good practice. That said, I mean, obviously that previous season was really great, and I think with a better comp, you could have a crazy good season, obviously. And I'm really hoping to see that run back. When you have a season, and I've had seasons like this. I've had seasons where I've gone like 1-6, or hell, I had an 0-7 season one time. And the run back from those seasons, that kind of drive to do better, can be a really strong motivator. So I am hoping that you can kind of use this season to push you back into that spot that you know you could be in. Gonna cough along out. All right, next we have Toxic, which was 2-5. Really excluded from analysis because of dropping early. The one thing I did want to comment on, just kind of as like a PSA for dropping seasons, because this was actually a pretty short season of only 7 weeks. If we're gonna run shorter seasons, especially, and I'd like to continue to do so, which we'll get to, it's important that like you're mindful of that. There was a lot of forfeits early in the season with this team, and then we had to forfeit the last 3 weeks. There were playoff implications from the fact that 2 coaches got free wins off this team that actually was 2-5, like, right? Like that was potentially winning games. So it was a little unfortunate to have that kind of have as much impact as it did, because this team was probably a playoff contender team, truthfully. And obviously I'm hope that Toxic is doing well, and I don't have any like necessarily ill will, but just as like a general PSA, in that I think people do underestimate occasionally how much dropping a league can influence things, and so make that choice with some consideration for your fellow coaches, especially for short seasons like this that are only 7 weeks. Next we have Phoenix, who had a kill leader of Golett. I think, if I remember right, the Golett was a trade. The observations on the season, I think Phoenix, dude, you had a great season. You're so down on yourself in chat all the time. It was a way better season than you give yourself credit for. A 4-3 is a great season. And actually, in previous Sandbox seasons, you would have been in playoffs with a 4-3. Honestly, I think you had some really great wins. And some of the prep I saw, like just like looking at your documents and things like that, like looking through your pace and stuff before making this presentation, looked really, really nice. I know that Little Cup is not necessarily your like flow necessarily and not your cup of tea, but like it seemed like you were finding it, man, and you were doing some unique stuff. You're doing some things I haven't seen a lot of Little Cup players do. I think you could be an easy future playoff contender, and like just keep at it. Like you've got it. Like don't let like don't let yourself get in the way of having a good season. And I think that if you have that more positive attitude towards this, I think that you could be very, very successful in the future. And it was really cool to see your team kind of like blossom into itself throughout the season as you got like I could tell that you had a pretty good handle on how to prep and play it by the time the season was over. Your match into Ollie seemed like it was pretty good. So yeah, that's all on that one. MBOSS. At this point, we're actually talking about playoff people. So MBOSS final standing was 5-2 and was the 6th seed overall. There's a lot of 5-2 teams, so be ready for that. Kill leader was Spoink and Poniard. I went ahead and put Spoink as the mascot, and the final placement that MBOSS had for the season was quarterfinalist. Team was great. Didn't really do any transactions post the video, PR video, but it was a really, really strong team. The Poniard and Spoink especially just did so much the whole season. In terms of observations, unfortunately, MBOSS is one of the only coaches I didn't get to play, and there aren't very many recorded matches of MBOSS' season. So it's unfortunate. So I didn't get as much data as I would have liked. I mean, it was obviously a really good season. 6th seed, 5-2. I mean, that's a great season. The team was really great as well. It seemed like, very competitive, good contender always. Never sleep on MBOSS. I personally, from this team, am going to be keeping an eye on Spoink because I don't think Spoink has ever gotten a lot of Sandbox use, and it went absolutely crazy this season. That Mon did so insanely well, so that was really cool. Really neat team. Always glad to have a good season with MBOSS, and hopefully we'll get to play next time. Next, we've got Ollie, who was 5-2, 5th seed, technically. Fun fact, Ollie and Flamingo tied exactly on like every front, but technically Ollie lost the head-to-head, so technically he would be 5th seed, but it was actually a tie for 5th and 4th. The kill leader was the Vulpix A and was a quarterfinalist. This was obviously a really strong performance from Ollie. The only coach that I lost a set to throughout the regular season, I was 6-1, was Ollie. And played the comp really cleanly. He always knew what he wanted week to week. I watched every game I saw with Ollie, was really, really nicely done. And despite having a pretty unconventional in some ways Ollie team, it just really came together well, and it was super, super strong. Always a contender, and I think that Little Cup plays a lot to Ollie's strengths, because I think that Little Cup is a lot more about what you don't have on a team rather than what you do have. It's more about looking at your opponent and saying, what is this person unable to do to me? And I think Ollie is so good at like finding those holes in teams and really exploiting them. And the Vulpix A was actually really cool this season. It doesn't have a abuser, like it doesn't have like a hail abuser, but it didn't need one, because just the ability to like set Veil, be bulky, and do just crazy good burst damage with Blizzard and Freeze Dry was kind of all it needed to do. I loved the use of the Drowsy throughout the season too. That was really cool. Drowsy ran some sets I would not have expected that did really, really well, like some of the Calm Mind and setup sets. Just super cool. Congrats to Ollie on quarterfinals. In a previous season, Ollie and I played in quarterfinals, and he knocked me out of playoffs. So if that tells you anything about the caliber of player here we're talking about. Next up is Flamingo, who tied with Ollie, but is technically 4th seed. Kill leader was Grimer A, and then the season placement was semifinalist. I knocked Flamingo out of the team. Team made 2 transactions with the Slowpoke G and the Ghastly, which were huge boons to the team. It went from a team I was not very high on to a team I thought was very, very good overall. Just with those 2 trades, it was a lot harder to prep for, a lot harder to deal with. I think really this team was carried, though, by really just outstanding prep and play. I watched pretty much every Ollie, sorry, not Ollie. I watched almost every Flamingo game this season, and they were all, he always had a plan. He always came in like really strong. Very good pivoting. It was just very like well done Little Cup play. I still don't, even with all the changes to the team, I still personally didn't love it. In the semifinals, while I did have that second game where I did spore spam him, really what it boiled down to, though, was I realized that there's no flying type on this team, there's no fire type on this team, and there's no rock type on this team. And I went, wait a minute, well, there's a flying type with the Ducklet, which did actually have a really good, Ducklet had one really good appearance. But the point was, is I was like, wait, if I tear a bug, can I just like wall almost the whole team? And the answer ended up being, yeah, the bulk of Scraggy went in both games and was able to just kind of clear house. And that's kind of weird. Like a bug type tear is not normally able to do that kind of stuff, right? And I think that's because the team just had really weird type cores and synergies throughout it. And I think it was a very cool experimental team. And I'm really interested to see what Flamingo plans for next season, having learned from this team this season. Because I think that, like, 5-2 is really good, and semifinalist is great. So if you can, like, find ways to capitalize on some of the things you learned from this season, I think that it's going to be a very scary subsequent season, like, even scarier. And also, for the record, Flamingo frequently would tech Terra Blast or coverage for fire, flying, and rock. Especially Terra Rock. Terra Rock Fomantis was a pretty common bring with Terra Blast throughout the season, if I remember correctly. So, yeah, that was Flamingo's season. Obviously, a really excellent job. We said in the PRs that Flamingo would do well throughout the season, and that was true. But I do think those transactions played a part. I think that the Slowpoke and the Ghastly really, really did help the team, and it was really cool to see them both. I think the Ghastly Grimer combo was actually surprisingly nasty. Okay. Next is our third seed, also 5-2, with the kill leader of Citadel and a semifinalist with Masto. Masto's team did not change throughout the season, stayed pretty consistent. My big observation, super strong season. Also probably one of my favorite people to watch all season. Masto had some really great commentary, all of his games. And I really enjoyed getting to see those sets. It was definitely something I looked forward to each week of the Sandbox season. The team worked extremely well and performed well. I mean, this was a rock solid comp. It was one of my favorites during the PRs, and it kind of performed exactly as well as I expected it to. I think the big thing that kind of got you in the end in those semifinals was I do think the team got a little linear near the end. I think that there was good set variety and you're like a creative player, but you did hit eventually a point where the team, kind of by the time that you played me in the last week, I had a pretty good idea of what the team was going to be. And based on what I kind of saw in the semifinal match, I think Burst was kind of in a similar spot where they had like a pretty good sense of like what was going to be going on there. So I think it was a good comp and a good team. It just didn't quite like have enough variety to stick it at the end. I don't necessarily have any advice with that because obviously it was great, but that is my one thing that I just kind of noticed offhanded. Really great season. I loved getting to know Masto a lot better this season. We definitely hit it off in the DMs and stuff, and it was really cool. So excited for future seasons for sure with Masto. Next, we have Burst. Burst was 6-1 and was the second overall seed. Kill leader of Metatite. Also, I believe the kill leader for the whole flippin' season. Season placement was finalist. Burst has been playing in Sandbox since the first season, if I'm remembering correctly, and has been a very consistent performer in Little Cup. So this finalist placement was coming, you know. Biggest observation, I do think that people underrate how well the comp made everything work. Like, the Metatite is obviously a pretty centralizing Pokemon, and I'm more than happy to talk a little bit about that later, but I actually think that Metatite would not be as good as it was if not on a team this good, because it's just a crazy team. I mean, they also just prepped super well. I mean, Burst had really good prep, like very good variety, great Terra calls, good callouts consistently. I mean, it was a very earned second seed, in my opinion. I think Burst had a tremendously strong season. I'm Burst's only loss the entire season. Um, Burst lost to me twice, and that's very telling in terms of how good the comp was. It was able to just really hammer down a lot of comps and do it really well. I also just wanted to give a shout out to the Rowlet that I don't know if everybody paid attention to. Rowlet went crazy this season, y'all. It was like a super cool like sleeper hit on the team. Got a lot of kills, had some really neat sets that were used. And with a flying grass typing, like you wouldn't necessarily expect that. And then lastly, there was the transaction for the Ghastly for Magnemite, which was definitely the play. Magnemite was way better and way scarier on this team. This team was a lot scarier to prep for the second time around with the Magnemite when I had to play it with that. So those are my thoughts on Burst Team. I don't know my thoughts on the Metatite itself as a Pokemon. I know that there is some calls to ban it for future seasons, and I'm not necessarily opposed to those because it was very strong. But I am interested to see what Burst has to say about counterplay to it, and I am also interested I don't think it was just Metatite that got Burst second seed by any stretch. I think that Burst got second seed this season. I think Burst put the time in and had the team and put in some really, really impressive work to get that seed. So that's my thoughts on that. But obviously it's worth looking at the Metatite, I think, for future seasons. Okay, and then last was me, which final standing, I was 6-1 with the first seed. My kill leader was Growlithe, and I was the champion this season. I won the whole thing. I beat Burst in finals and beat Flamingo in semis. So now we're going to actually kind of dive into this team in some depth. But before we do that, I do want to just talk about a couple like observations, which I like to do just like because I'm usually logging most of these games in the dock and I read the match reports, and I do typically like having games on as like background noise or music while I'm doing homework or whatever. So I've watched a lot of the games this season, so there are some just interesting things I noticed. Tailwind was out and Trick Room was in. This was the heaviest Trick Room season we've ever had in Sandbox. Most teams had Trick Room and most of the top teams had Trick Room, and it was kind of a bloodbath of the Trick Room teams. I think it's one of the things that really got Ted this season, which was interesting. We have had Trick Room for sure in previous seasons, and it's never been not strong in Sandbox, but I've never seen this many teams have Trick Room and have it be this good. Speaking more as an admin, I actually really like the overall team balance this season, a lot better than I did the previous season. I still think there's some room to work to do there, which I'll talk about at the end for future seasons. But I do think that, to me, it didn't feel like any team was heavily advantaged or disadvantaged over other teams, and that any team like had a huge like edge during the draft by grabbing this Pokemon. I didn't really feel that this time, which I would have felt that in previous seasons. And if you actually look at like the draft order and things like that, like Metatite was not Burst's first pick, everybody. Like that was gotten later, so just something to note. I think also related to that, I think team composition played a larger role this season in terms of performance than usual. I don't think it was everything. I think that coach prep and play obviously is always the biggest thing, but I found like defensive team synergy was really surprisingly important, especially for a Terra season. I think that teams that Flamingo's team is actually a surprisingly good example because it actually has a really good defensive backbone. Like it has really good pivots and some really good like defensive synergies and things like that, even though it's really unusual. And while there were teams that had, I think, some mons on it that like were more convincing to me with the mons that were around those other mons, like the composition's defensive core wasn't as strong and it got exploited really hard. So I think especially like team synergy defensively was a bigger deal than usual, and I definitely felt that my whole season. I still want to do 7-week seasons in Sandbox. I really like the 7 weeks. I think it keeps things moving, and I don't think that a super long season of Sandbox is super necessary. And last note, knockoff dominance. Knockoff is always a good move in Little Cup formats, obviously, but I've never felt like In the past, we've had a lot of top teams that didn't have a knockoff spammer, like something that like was good at clicking knockoff as like a key Pokemon. And that really didn't happen this time. Every single team that placed really highly had a couple, like had one or two mons that could click knockoff and like do it really well. I think maybe Ollie's team didn't. I'll have to think back on that. But other than that, almost every other top team had like a good knockoff user, and that's really interesting. Because it's obviously the best move in the format, and like we joke about it all the time, but it was interesting to really see that in play in a big way that I don't think I've seen in a lot of previous seasons, where knockoff is good, but not like as mandatory, whereas this season it definitely felt a lot stronger. And now we dive into my team a little bit, get to kind of do the whole champion run around. So my team, we're just going to go through mon by mon. I'm just going to talk about how they did and some things that I noticed. So first we have Scraggy. I would give it a 9 out of 10. That mon's great. I really am glad I drafted it as my first pick. Key points, the Intimidate and Moxie were just awesome abilities. Moxie ended up winning me a couple of sets. Intimidate won me a couple sets. I actually think the set variety on Scraggy is really, really, really good. It's got like just a crazy move pool for a little cut Pokemon with so much coverage and lots of like cool tech moves and stuff too. Like I didn't use coaching all season. I kept trying to find like a way to use it. It just like, it does a lot for one Pokemon. It can do almost anything you would need it to do in a week, honestly, but its best thing it does is click knockoff, so you do that most of the time. It was a great Eviolite candidate. I think it got Eviolite the most often of any Pokemon throughout the season, but it was not locked to it. I did not feel like I needed Eviolite on Scraggy every single week. I actually really liked Assault Vest as well. I ran Assault Vest pretty frequently on it, especially in like the middle of the season. It is a slight Terra Sync, even with all of the like things that are in its favor, it did want to Terra pretty often. I would not call it a Terra Sync in the same way other mons are, but it definitely is something that you are pretty much always planning to Terra in preview, if that makes sense. Limited fairy types and bulk help it a lot. So there's just not a lot of fairy types in Little Cup. There's just very few, especially this gen, which I think really helps it out, and its bulk is crazy good. So it could like actually live even like 4x play roughs and dazzling gleams and stuff from like non-super effective hits and things like that. And then I also found out that it pairs really well with fire and ghost types for the fairy resistance and for the fighting immunity in particular. Those are kind of its best partners. I think Scraggy plus Growlithe or Litten is like probably one of the most real cores I've ever run into in a draft league. I think it's better with Growlithe, which we'll talk about in a second. But that pairing is really strong. Future recommendation, Scraggy stays tier 1. We actually had it in tier 2 last season. That was a mistake for sure. I think it benefits from Terra, but I think it should stay tier 1 even for the non-Terra seasons. I think it's just too strong. It did way too much and it performed at a tier 1 level all season, and I didn't even have to Terra it a lot of games. So really cool mon. I'm super glad I drafted it. Growlithe. Man, Growlithe. Growlithe is my first 10 out of 10 rating for a Pokemon. In the corner, I have my screenshot with Raz, where we talk about where Raz says, I have 0 Growlithe answers, unfortunately. And I said, I disagree, but I peeped and it does go stupid. Because that is kind of how Growlithe was all season. Growlithe was my best performing mon of the season. It had the highest kills, it had the best differential, and also in game, it just felt the best of any Pokemon on the team. It has crazy set variety because it's got 70 in both attack and special attack and intimidate and flash fire and justified even. And you can run it with all abilities are viable, all items are great. That's the biggest thing, honestly. In Little Cup, item slots are so hard to like, you have to be so conscientious of your item slots in Little Cup. And I ran it like AV, I ran it Scarfed, I ran it Eviolite, I ran it like every item. Like every item's good on this thing. It's just so versatile. And with 70 in both of those attacking stats, it just hits insanely hard. You give it an Eviolite, bulk it out, it eats like every hit in the game. It has Intimidate and it has Snarl. And Wisp, so it can be like an incredible support Pokemon. I actually didn't use support Growlithe most of the season. I used it kind of offensively, and then my last like 2 games, I was like, oh, Eviolite, Intimidate, Wisp, Snarl, Heatwave, Growlithe just like wins in these matchups, and it did. It was insane. I think Growlithe was just an incredibly good mon. Future recommendations, it's tier 1 for sure. And I think more people should draft it, frankly. It was incredible. I think there's a couple reasons why it's not drafted very often. Hunter had it in a previous season and actually gave me some tips on using it. But I think the main reason why it isn't drafted is because there's a lot of good fire types in Little Cup Draft. And notably, there's a lot of lower tier fire types in Little Cup Draft. So a lot of the time you want to get your fire type from tier 2, especially because there's some really good ones in tier 2 that can offer a team a lot. And so it's kind of hard to justify being like, oh yeah, Growlithe is going to be worth the budget, especially when in tier 1 you have those typings that are really hard to get in other places on your draft, like your fairy and steel types and stuff. But man, it's worth it. I think that this mon is crazy. It was super strong, super good. I'd highly recommend drafting it, and I will look at drafting it again in the future. So that's Growlithe. Doduo was my tier. By the way, we're going in tier order, so tier 1's first. So now we're in tier 2s. Doduo, 6 out of 10. I'm actually a little disappointed. I was so hyped when I got Doduo. I was like, ooh, this is gonna be the guy, like the winning Pokemon, because Wakeman had such a strong season with it. But it didn't really work super well on my comp. I barely used it in the later chunk of the season. One of the biggest things for that actually was it doesn't have dual wing beat, so your only flying staff is Brave Bird, and this thing is made of paper, so you click Brave Bird, you maybe get a kill, you maybe don't, and then you die. I was a very consistent Tailwind setter though. The couple weeks where I needed it to click Tailwind, it did that really, really, really well. And I did like the explosive output. I think it's just too frail though. And having fast knockoff is really nice. Fast knock is really good, and was good in a couple of matchups. Future recommendation for it, I'd definitely keep it tier 2. Even though I wasn't super high on it on this particular comp, it had a place on it, and I think on other comps it would be a lot better. I think it's a nice piece, and it's way too strong for tier 3. So that was my experience with Doduo. The ratings get a little bit subjective, and they really are based more on this comp rather than like overall viability. Next is Poplio, which I gave an 8.52. The key points on this one, spread damage is amazing. You click Hyper Voice, and it does so much damage. I remember when I was calcing finals into Burst, and it was like Poplio was doing 60 to 70% to like over 2/3 of the team with just modest max special attack Hyper Voice, and that just feels amazing. Spread damage is really good in Little Cup in general. I think you need good spread damage on a team, which is something that I didn't really talk about a lot in the PRs, but I think it's true. I actually think one of the reasons why Vulpix was so dominant this season was because it could just click Blizzard. And Poplio kind of functions similarly. Like the ability to just click Hyper Voice is really, really, really strong. I actually think it's a little tough to work with though. Poplio's speed tier is 40, which is good in Trick Room, kinda, but it actually gets undersped by a lot of better Trick Room threats. And I found the bulk kind of tough to work with, because you kind of need to invest then in bulk if you're not going to invest in speed, but it doesn't eat hits necessarily the best. I did actually like it with Eviolite. If Growlithe or Scraggy didn't get the Eviolite in a week, it was always Poplio, and it actually was able to tank hits pretty well with Eviolite. I preferred offensive items and bulk items. I notably didn't like Throat Spray, because kind of your thought when you draft this thing is like, I'll click Hyper Voice once, do a bunch of damage, and then I'll Throat Spray boost, and then I'll click Hyper Voice again, and then I'll kill. And what I found with Throat Spray was it didn't keep me alive long enough, and that initial damage that the Hyper Voice did either got the kills I needed it to, or Poplio was dead, and it was kind of a waste of an item slot. I was finding that more frequently things like Life Orb would like put something in KO range that wasn't in KO range previously, and were just better, at least for the course of my season. So I would recommend like running something to help it with its bulk or defensive synergy, like Wakan Berry. I ran that into Burst in the last week. to just give it some more longevity, because really you just need it to click the hyper voice move. It's actually also got a pretty good move pool. I liked Baby Doll Eyes as a tech move on it. It got Charm, but I typically just ran this thing pretty offensive. I didn't use a lot of the more utility-oriented stuff because it was just so good at doing damage. Future recommendations, keep it tier 2. It's kind of just not good enough to be a tier 1, honestly. Like, it just... most everything in tier 1 either is a better Eevee-like candidate, or does more damage than it, or offers you, like, a weather or something. But it is one of the best tier 2s, I think. I would highly recommend it. If you're looking for a water type, Popplio did exceptionally well, and in previous videos, I've actually been pretty mean to some water types that I have drafted. And so, shout out to Popplio. I really enjoyed using it. I would draft it again in a heartbeat. Next is Voltorb, which is getting a 7 out of 10. And we're in tier 3. So, key points. Much better than last time I used it. In a previous list, I had the Hisuian Voltorb, and I didn't like it very much. I rated that mon really low, and I was not super high on the Pokemon. I think it has some fun and interesting set variety. Dual screens is really nice. Foul play is good. Volt switch is good. It just was able to do a lot in one Pokemon. Obviously, the biggest thing you get with Voltorb is that speed tier of 100, but man, is 100 speed so good. Like, you can get the jump on anything, including like half of people's good Scarfers, which is kind of crazy. I found that it actually had some surprising item variety too. I ran this thing with Covert Cloak, Sash, and Choice Scarf, and it felt good with all of those. It's made of paper, it does die in a hit, but then you have Aftermath, which is a really good ability. I think it's kind of a tough mon though. It's so matchup dependent. It didn't come to either of my finals games because in the matchups that it was against, it was just so bad. And I think that like clicking fast Electro Web was actually not really what I thought it was good for. I thought it was good for other forms of utility instead a lot of the time, just with the kind of team I had. I did find that Electro Ball could actually do some really good damage. One of the things with Voltorb is it just doesn't do very good damage. But when you have something that's like, hi, I'm base 20 speed, and you max your speed out and like max your special attack, Electro Ball can like just Oko stuff. It's really cool, actually. There was some talk on the server I saw about bumping the Voltorbs to tier 2 in the future, and I'll be honest, I could kind of go either way. They might technically be too strong with having that base 100 speed tier. Like, that might just be alone for tier 3 too much value, having something that's base 100 speed. But also, like, I don't think it would get tier 2 value. Like, I think Doduo didn't do great on my team necessarily, but I kind of think on most teams Doduo would be doing more for you, and I think that Popplio would definitely be doing a lot more for you. It's just kind of hard for me to see it, like, getting that level of value, especially with how matchup dependent it is. I could see it being good in those tiers though, so I'd be interested in a discussion on it, but for now I would say it was appropriately tiered. I'd say tier 3 was fine. Next tier 3 mon was Shroomish, which was my mascot, which I would give an 8 out of 10. This is the best performance the mushroom has ever had. I've drafted this fucking mushroom so many times. Normally it's kind of trash, actually. Shroomish tends to be kind of bad when I've used it in the past, and this was the only season I've had where I was like, wow, Shroomish was really good, actually. I actually also didn't use it very much during the main season. I wanted it to assist in playoffs. The thing I found when I've drafted Shroomish in the past is that if you bring it often, everybody brings all the good tech for it, and then you don't get to click the Spore button. And Spore is really broken. So I didn't use it throughout most of the season, in part because I was hoping that by the time we got to playoffs and things were really tight, I could then bring the mushroom out and like bring it with some really good sets that it could do a lot with to surprise my playoff opponents. And it definitely, Flamingo definitely wasn't as prepped for it as he could have been, and while Burst did prep for it, the Shroomish did come out in the final game of finals and definitely guaranteed me the win, which was really cool. So super happy with that. It has a lot better set variety this gen too. It's got like some better move pool expansions, and I think Terra does a lot to let Shroomish do more things, which is really cool. Also, the big thing I've run into with Shroomish is it has good bulk, but it's not good enough to like really eat hits on both sides. I always found that I would like get a spore off and then die in previous seasons, but in this season, because of the way this team worked, not only was Shroomish able to come in a lot easier because it defensively was able to just pivot on a lot of stuff that my team had weaknesses to, but the bulk also felt better because I had Intimidate support, so I could like really lean into running it with more mixed bulk and having it actually live a lot of big hits, which was really cool. Obviously, its usual ability to Quick Feet could be really nice in matchups, but with Quick Feet, that bulk problem becomes a big thing. I actually ran Poison Heal in the last match because I was finding Poison Heal was keeping me out of 2-hit KO range from a bunch of stuff, which was cool. Future recommendations. I think without Terra, this might need to go to tier 2 potentially. Terra Grass is just such a like thing that really stops Shroomish from going crazy. And I think that you could Terra Facade it, but like you shouldn't. Like you should Terra something else most of the time. It just wasn't getting the calcs it would need in some matchups. I do think with that there is sufficient counterplay to Shroomish in a Terra format. You can Terra Grass, you can run Goggles, you can run Lumberry, you can shut it down with Taunt, you can outspeed it pretty easily with, unless it's the Quick Feet set, and in which case, like, you know, then it's probably pretty frail and you can kill it, you know. There's like actually pretty good counterplay, I think, in a Terra format to it. I think without Terra, though, this thing might be really crazy. And I think that it would probably need a bump to tier 2 for those seasons. I would argue for this season, though, that tier 3 was correct. I don't think Shroomish was over-tiered. So that's my thoughts on Shroomish. Really good. Really happy I had a good season with the guy because, I mean, he's the mascot and normally he doesn't do anything. So I was really happy with that. Next was Geodude, which I got in tier 3. 8 out of 10. Really liked it too. About the same as Shroomish. One of the best spread damage nukers you can get. You click Earthquake, you click Rock Slide. You can tech a third coverage move if you want, or you can run Wildcard Protect, which is what I usually did. It's super easy to run. You just run max HP Sturdy and max attack, and it does great. I even ran max speed once because if you invest enough speed, you can get the jump on some Trick Room teams. I did that into Flamingo, and it was actually pretty good. And it's got high horsepower for when you don't want to click Earthquake, which is nice. I ran weakness policy every week on it, basically, because I was like, wait, if I have Sturdy, I can just get free +2 because it's weak to every typing in the game, which is also why it felt very matchup dependent. It's also got a really good Trick Room speed tier for this format. It's like base 20, so it can like underspeed even like other Trick Room mons, which is really good. And it did go crazy a couple weeks. In terms of if it should stay tier 3, this is kind of similar to earlier when I was talking about the Voltorb, where I could go either way on if this needs the bump to tier 2. I think it's probably best to compare it with Rhyhorn, which I think Rhyhorn's kind of just overall probably a little bit better, but I don't know if it's a tier better, you know? And like I said, it's actually surprisingly matchup dependent. I did not find that Geodude was a mon I could bring every week. Which I think tends to be something that I find in tier 3 Pokemon, where it's like this mon is really good, but it's good in these circumstances. But it shined for sure, and I think it was a good partner on the team. Despite the hype of it, I actually basically never ran Earthquake Levitate next to Jingling. I think I only had that happen one entire game, like all season. So that was kind of funny. All right, moving on. My other tier 3, Greavard. Man, this fucking Pokemon, dude. Overall rating 10 out of 10. Greavard was outstanding all season. It was definitely my underdog Pokemon. Quite pun intended. It and Growlithe were very good dogs for me all season. Ghost typing is really, really hard to get in Little Cup, and my team I thought needed a ghost type during the draft, and I kind of drafted Greavard without knowing much about it pretty late in the draft. It hadn't seen a lot of play either, and oh boy, it did so well. And my team had some trouble with fighting types, so I thought it would be a good utility piece for that. But it ended up being a lot more than that. Shadow Sneak is off its attack stat is so good, and Fluffy is kind of a godly ability because unless like it just kind of like on a team that already had double intimidate, having Fluffy was just so good because it was like, okay, cool, your physical attacker does literally no damage. It genuinely in some matchups, Grievard felt like having a second Eviolite Pokemon, which is like insane praise. It's also great in Trick Room. It's got like 35 base speed for Trick Room and it's priority, which makes it great. And it tanks damage really well. In terms of future recommendations, I mean, obviously this was my favorite tier 3. I think it's kind of a tough call. It's got actually a surprisingly limited move pool. It's got like some good coverage moves and it's got some okay utility. I got some funny use out of Ally Switch a couple times. But it doesn't have anything like super deep or anything. And it's typing and Fluffy also gives it a lot of openings. Like, remember, this is the knockoff season, and Graveard is weak to knockoff, which is bad. And Fluffy gives it this just crazy fire weakness. Like, I want to be clear, this thing dies to basically any fire attack in the game. I ran it pickup during finals solely because I thought that burst would tech Fire Punch and just like OHKO it. Like, like it's that bad. I think this really was a comp dependent mon. I think that on most teams, Grievard would not be a 10 out of 10. I think specifically on a team with the tools that I had, Grievard was pretty insane. And I think it really benefited from the comp. I actually think tier 3 is probably fine for it. If folks want to talk about bumping it in the future, I think I'd be open to at least having the discussion, especially given how rare ghost types are. But I don't know. It's kind of got... It's got such strong pros and such strong cons. And while I think I had a great season with it and I loved the dog, I don't feel the way I do with Growlithe, where I'm like, I could grab Growlithe round 1 next season and feel fine. I don't feel that way with Grievard. I think Grievard, I would need the right team. So, take that as you will. Next, we have Chingling. Chingling gets a 7 out of 10. It was also we're now in tier 4. It's actually probably the most consistent Trick Room setter I've ever had in a Little Cup draft, if I'm being honest. It was really good at setting Trick Room. It's actually also got a pretty good move pool. Knock is really fun to have, and it's got some good coverage, and 65 special attack's pretty good. Levitate's amazing in Little Cup. Having a ground immunity is really cool. And I didn't always have enough field presence though. My biggest critique of Chingling was that sometimes its field presence wasn't great. And its bulk was good. I would fully invest in bulk and it would eat the hits I needed it to, which has been historically a massive problem for me with Trick Room setters. Future recommendation, we just put this thing in tier 3 next season. It was way too strong in tier 4. It's probably the best or one of the best tier 4s this season. Even if we increase the power level of tier 4, I think Chingling's in tier 3. I actually kind of low-key think it's a better Trick Room setter than things in tier 3 like Hatena. It was just that good. Really fun mon. I liked it a lot. I would draft it again. In tier 3 even. Snorunt. This was my tier 4. 6 out of 10. Inner Focus is always good. It's actually fine in tier 4. It had a place on the team. I brought it a week. With a different typing, I actually think Snorunt would be a real mon. Like, if it wasn't a pure ice type, or even just had a dual typing, it's got such a cool move pool and got so many things going for it that I think it'd actually be pretty solid. But unfortunately, it's a pure ice type. Tier 4 is fine. Last mon, Hoot Hoot. The overall rating, I don't know. It didn't come to a game. If I had theoretically played Ted, I would have brought Hoot Hoot into him, because it would have absolutely destroyed the Sun mode. Shout out. I actually unironically grabbed it because it hard counted Shroomish. I'm not kidding. The only reason I picked this thing up at the very end of the draft was because it beat Shroomish, and I didn't want people to have Shroomish counterplay. So, tier 4 is fine. It's pretty bad. So, overall team reflections. I actually don't say this lightly. The team's a 10 out of 10. And I have been playing Draft League for a number of years, and I genuinely think this is the strongest team I've ever drafted in a Draft League season. And it's shocking that I can say that and also say it didn't feel overpowered. I've had seasons where I had mons that should have been banned or felt way too strong, and things around the team were not contributing as much as the really broken Pokemon. But I didn't feel that with this team. Nothing was overpowered. I would say most of the mons were tiered correctly. Like, there's a couple things like I talked about that maybe could have been bumped, but for the most part, I mean, I actually think everything was about in the right spot, and I actually think there's more egregious things in almost every tier that could be moved, other than maybe Chingling, on some of the other teams than this team had. Yeah, it was. I think really it was that composition and defensive synergy. This team would not have worked at all if the defensive core and the overall play of it and the having the utility options it had with the trick room mode, with even having a tailwind option and a speedier, more offensive mode, and having the set versatility that these Pokemon had, it wouldn't have been successful. I think that I'm very, very proud of this draft. I am going to miss playing with this team a lot because, damn, I wish all teams were so easy to prep and play with. And then I actually do want to also just reflect on the season itself. This is one of my strongest draft seasons ever. I haven't had a season like this, I think, actually since like the first season of Sandbox or something similar. I was extremely dominant. I was winning almost every. I only dropped one set, and it was a pretty tight set, and that feels really good. I actually think the weekly prep I had was really good. There was a lot of set variety, and I also didn't spend ages prepping these matches. I mean, I literally would spend 20 minutes to an hour prepping almost every match, and the only match that got any more than that was finals, where I spent about an hour and a half, I think. I went back and watched my VODs. I do think some of my play could have been better. Watching some of the matches, I think I could tunnel vision a little bit, or be thinking about the next game too early. Like, I'd think I'd be out when I was in. There's actually some good examples of that in even like the playoffs. Like when I was playing Burst, I had game 2 I could have won. If I Terra Ground the Chingling in the last turn, and I have the thought of maybe the Magnemite's choice locked and Burst accidentally locks an electric move, which did happen, by the way. If I Terra Ground, click Psychic into the Rowlet, I win from there. Chingling just click Psychic and I would win. Similarly, if I had remembered to click Terra Dragon on the Popplio the turn before, unless it was a 4 or 5 hit Bullet Seed, I think I calced it, and it's like a 5 hit Bullet Seed, I would have won that set pretty well, or I was pretty likely to win at that stage. And into Flamingo, at one point I clicked Charm into a Defiant Mankey, and it was a really bad play, and neither of us got it, and I was like, oh my god, what was I thinking? So I don't know. I think, not that my play was bad, I actually think my play was really good overall. I actually think it's some of the more consistent play I've had, but I do think that I need to be a little bit more careful in terms of like when I'm in a comfortable position, and then also thinking about when I'm in a position that seems losing, I need to be careful to not give up too early, and I need to keep my cool and try to find my outs a little bit better. That said, one thing I noticed this season that I'm really happy with, my positioning was really good. I pretty much always had the right mons in the right place at the right time. Like, I was super, super consistent at making sure that I was setting myself up for like really optimal end games and positions and things like that. You see that a lot, especially in the later half of my season. And I think that actually that's really what won me the season, was just positioning, just having the right thing in the right place at the right time. And also I think that too, I've run into this before, and I've kind of thought on it and talked about it with people, but I think that, a team like this that's really just got really good defensive synergy as being like its cornerstone is really good for me. And Gen 9, I think defensive synergy has gotten a little less emphasis because of the nature of how Terra works, but for me personally, I just play a lot better when I have a really good defensive synergy through a team. It just makes me a lot more effective player, and so I'm going to continue to kind of focus on that in my drafts going forward, because I think it's going to result in better seasons for me. And last, future Sandbox seasons. Just some general thoughts on future seasons. I'd like to actually sit down with the admin team and talk about fully restructuring budgets and tiering in general. I think top-heavy drafts are still too strong. And I think tier 4 needs to either be stronger, gotten rid of, reevaluated, something. I think tier 4 is kind of a problem right now. because people are grabbing too many of them. They're not coming to games. Most of them are bad, and then a couple of them get through the cracks every season, and they're really, really strong. Like last season it was Pikapek, this season it was Chingling, you know. Like, we need to kind of like get a grip on it, and we need to figure out exactly what we want to do with tier 4, because I think it's kind of a mess right now. Unsure how and what gimmicks will be allowed in Champions. I really have come to like Open Terra as a format for Little Cup. I actually think that Little Cup really benefits from having Open Terra, just because you can't get everything in Little Cup, like I've said. And I think that it gives you workarounds in a way that I've started to appreciate more and more as I played this season. In the past, I didn't like Open Terra because it gave you those options, but I also found that in a lot of seasons where we've done no gimmick, usually that's like Twin Leaf Division, that sometimes you kind of get matchup checked. Like you're like, oh, I can't win this matchup, and it feels kind of bad. And I like that Terra lets you get around like just getting matchup checked a little bit more. I think that that's actually really healthy. If Max and Z moves are allowed, I don't like either of those. I don't think we should play those seasons. I don't think that we should have those gimmicks come back. But we'll check with coaches on that. But I'd be very open to more Terra seasons for sure. I liked that we had a more expanded ban list this season. I would be open to more bans. Honestly, I think that this season your team composition was really rewarded, and that was something I felt like as the admin team we wanted. We didn't want it to be, okay, the first 3 people in the draft get these 3 broken Pokemon, and then everybody else has to hope they draft something good enough to stop it. It didn't feel like that this season. I think that teams were really rewarded for competition, and I actually liked, while there were some things in tier 2, or especially while there were some things in like tier 2, 3, and 4 that maybe we could have moved around a little bit, I do think that like overall most of the moves we made, like almost everything that we moved up a tier, I think was a really smart call. And I think that this was a better tier list than the previous one. And I think while it probably could use another round, for like if we decided to just do a repeat of this format, I would definitely go through another round of changes. I think that it was solid. It was a lot better than it has been. And last thing, I know that there's been some talk about banning Eviolite. I'm still going to advocate to keep Eviolite. I think that Eviolite just adds such a unique element to Little Cup play, and having that centralized Pokemon that you have to kind of plan and play around is such a like core component of Little Cup draft. Like my thought when I play is often, where is the Eviolite Pokemon, and like how do I want to beat it, and like how am I going to prep around it? And I think that losing that would make Little Cup not feel like Little Cup. So I would prefer we keep it. And I also kind of, in a relation to that, I wouldn't like the AV future, because if we ban Eviolite, then your best Pokemon is whichever one abuses AV the best. And then it's like, then special attackers suck. And I don't want that. Then Scraggy becomes the best Mon because it has Intimidate and it's great with AV. And I love Scraggy, but I kind of don't want that to be every week. I think that Eviolite, is nice to have around for that reason. So thanks for watching. I know this was probably a longer video. I haven't checked the timestamp or anything. But I just want to say thanks to Raz, of course, for another great season of Sandbox. I'm super looking forward to future seasons. And while I didn't really talk about it in the video, I am so glad I have my first doubles championship title after so long. I mean, I've made finals so many times, and it's really, really cool to finally have a championship under my belt in a league that I put a lot of time and a lot of care and a lot of effort into. So I'm looking forward to the future of the Sandbox Draft League, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.